the later half of the Middle Ages, we started to move from these kingdoms that existed in Europe all throughout to people deciding to finally form into countries again with big governments. One reason this happened, actually, you'll learn about in one of the stations, and you actually heard in the video you watched at the beginning of this unit, was the arrival of the Vikings, and people feared them, and they needed big armies to take on these Vikings. So one of the countries that starts to form during this time is this island country right here, which we know today as England. Now, the interesting thing about England is it has a pretty rich history. The first kings of England were pretty good kings. They did some good things. But as we know, with power, there is corruptions. Not every king is always going to be good, right? So one of the kings that existed in early part of England's history was a guy named King John. King John was a horrible king. Nobody liked King John. Not even the rich people in the kingdom liked King John. He was doing a lot of things that were not right. For example, in England, you were supposed to get a trial if you had committed a crime, or if you were accused of committing a crime. King John would also often take his opposers, people who opposed to his rule or disagree with him, and basically arrest them and punish them, and sometimes kill them without any fair trial. He was just basically the dictator that said, this is what's going to happen to you. That's one thing that made people mad. He was also raising taxes. And I don't know about you, maybe talking with your parents, typically if you're a ruler who raises taxes, people don't tend to like you so much. So there was that as well. There was just a lot of things that he was doing. Oh, he also created something that really upset the people, and that was basically he was creating a system where he was basically getting rid of the courts, and that kind of links to the idea of him being the dictator and telling people what their punishments are. But he was doing deliberate things to ruin the courts, and that was upsetting people quite a bit. So bottom line, people didn't like King John. So much so that the wealthy nobles, with pretty much the support of the peasants who didn't like him either, decided King John was becoming too powerful. And they create this document, or they force the creation of a document. It's a very famous document in history. It's called the Magna Carta. So the Magna Carta was significant because it basically said that you're a king and your powers are limited. There are certain rights that we have as people that you can't take from us. They are God-given rights, and you can't take them. The reason this document is so important in history is if you think back to some documents in American history, for example, the Declaration of Independence, we stole or we used a lot of information or ideas from that document. One of the first ideas in the very beginning of our Declaration of Independence, written by Thomas Jefferson, basically states that, look, God has given us certain unalienable rights, which is the word he uses, and no person, no living being should be allowed to take those from us. So Thomas Jefferson literally took that idea from the Magna Carta. It is the big idea of this document. And there are lots of documents around the world today that use that same wording, that look, you may be a leader, you may be a ruler over a country, but there are certain rights you cannot take for us. They are God-given rights. So what happens is they come to sign this document, and King John doesn't want to sign it. Why would somebody want to limit their power, right? But King John really doesn't have a choice here, because basically all the wealthy nobles in the kingdom, plus the peasants, are against him. So if he doesn't sign it, they rebel, they kick him out, and he either winds up not in power anymore or even dead, right? So his options were pretty much, hey, enjoy the fact that you're king and you're very wealthy and you still have a lot of power, or don't sign this document and you have no power whatsoever. So King John never wanted to sign the Magna Carta, but he was left with little choice. And it changed history, not just for that kingdom, but it set this precedent that all people have certain rights that you can't take away from them. And many of the constitutions that countries have written, many of the declarations, like our Declaration of Independence to get our freedom from England, basically states this, that look, there are certain rights we have that you can't take from us. So in Schoology, as you look over this activity, one of the main activities you're going to do looks like this. On the left, you have actual laws or rules from the Magna Carta. On the right, you have what's called the Bill of Rights, which is the first 10 amendments of the Constitution of the United States. What you're going to do is you're going to look through back and forth through both of these and see what similarities you find and what differences you find. You're going to find, I'm telling you right now, that there are several Bill of Rights, things that basically in our country that are rights that you have as human beings that cannot be taken from you, that were pretty much just taken right out of the Magna Carta. We like to think as Americans that we come up with all these original ideas, and we do, but there were a lot of things we took straight from the Magna Carta. And of course, at the end of this activity, there's a chart in which you write down some similarities and differences that you find in the rights that are in the Magna Carta and the Bill of Rights. And notice it does say that you should use complete sentences when doing this. So take a look at that, and I think you'll find an interesting connection between a very famous document in our culture and what they took from a very famous document in England, signed by King John, he knew he didn't want to, called the Magna Carta.